Are you looking to be a motion graphics designer, but you don't quite know graphic design like me, but you still want to practice motion graphics? Well, fear not, because I found this website called FreePic, and with this particular Instagram carousel vector I found on the website, I'm able to create this animation, which I'll share my step-by-step process on how I made it work like how it is with you today. Hi, Ben here. Welcome to the channel. Over here, I normally do tutorials and just mainly upload videos that I want to upload at my own pace, you know? Anyway, I noticed that only a very small percentage of you guys are subscribed, so remember to hit the subscribe button to support the channel and to be updated on future tutorials and random videos I decide to upload. Without further ado, let's jump right into the video. For today's tutorial, I've linked the vector you have to download in the description below. After downloading the vector onto your PC, wait, you still cannot throw it right into After Effects. I mean, you can, it will just be a simple animation like this. But if you want to go much more creative and much more extra, much more pattern like how we Malaysians say it, then yes, we will have to fire up Illustrator first and separate the layers before we continue. So once you have fired up the file in Illustrator, you can see that there are only 2 layers, and the rest are actually hidden within the objects layer. You have to separate them according to what needs to be done. For me, I've already separated it on a separate document prior to making this video, and as you can see, I've already labeled and separated the elements I would like to animate. Of course, I've only separated what I wanted to animate, so if you feel like you want to animate less, then feel free to divide it less. But if you want to have it as detailed as mine, or even more detailed, then feel free, of course, to separate however you like. Just remember to name your layers so you don't get lost when you throw them into After Effects. One thing I don't quite like about Illustrator is that somehow every layer has to be its own layer for it to work. You cannot group layers, because if you do that, it becomes one layer in After Effects. I much prefer Photoshop, where I can organize my layers properly in folders, because it will then be converted into compositions in After Effects, which is definitely much more easy to organize and much more easier to animate. Oh, one more thing before I forget, remember to increase the document size in Illustrator as well, because it's a bit small, so increase it to go slightly around 2000 pixels so that you can render it in 1080p much easily. Hi, Future Ben here. So I was editing this tutorial the other day and I figured out that you can actually continuously rasterize your layer, your vector layer, so that it updates and stays clear in After Effects. So yeah, you don't necessarily have to resize it before in Illustrator. If you realize that it's smaller than what you intend it to be, you can just straight away do it in After Effects if you want to. You can still resize it if you want to. Once you have done separating, save it and then drag and drop your files to After Effects. In After Effects, on your main comp, which I named it IG Carousel, start by sorting out your layers into their respective comps. In my case, I've put everything that's inside the phone into a phone comp, and everything that's inside the card in a card comp. I left the shadows outside, and the background stays as it is. If you're wondering why I only have one card comp, that is because I'm going to animate it once and then duplicate it so that I only have to animate once and not 5 times or 3 times in this instance. And when we get there, I'll show you a very nifty trick on how to quickly swap layers or comps within your composition. So after you have sorted out your layers into their respective comps, let's start working on the elements inside the phone. As you can see, there's still a huge chunk of layers and it's a bit confusing, so why not let's separate them into more pre-comps and label them top bar, bottom bar, and main card. The phone layer stays where it is. While I envision the flow of the animation, I was thinking that it would come from top to the bottom. Like when you fire up an app, normally I expect an app to finish animations from the top until the bottom. I know that's just me, you can do bottom up, it's up to you. But for this tutorial, let's do it from the top to the bottom. So because we want to animate the top elements first, let's fire up the top bar pre-comp. And now let's begin animating. As you can see, the elements are black, and then the background of After Effects is also black, so it's very difficult to animate, right? One thing you can do, you can either toggle the transparency grid on, or like me, you can just create a white solid and then turn it into a white guide layer. So now there is a guide layer, my background is now white, and it doesn't reflect on my render. Because anything that is labeled a guide layer, they will be ignored during the rendering of the final product. So I can animate the black elements with ease. For me, I'm thinking of leaving the notification bar as it is, so I'm not going to animate that. So let's start with the IG bar, where I want it to slide down a little bit. Let's put a keyframe here and a keyframe there. Let's add some easing and maybe change up how it looks in the curve editor so that it comes in fast and ends slowly. Have the transparency go from 0 to 100. Feel free to change the duration of the keyframes however you see fit to suit your own taste. Next, let's move on to the story bubble, which consists of your story and your story ring and your profile picture. So put these into a new pre-comp and then delete the rest, or you can keep them first for positioning reference. I left the add story icon as its own layer outside of the pre-comp. So let's enter your story bubble pre-comp, and as you can see, you have your story ring, your profile pic. So how are you gonna put your profile picture into that tiny ring? You're not gonna use a mask, right? It sounds like a pain in the ass. Well, let me teach you a very quick way to solve this problem. Let's use a track matte. So throw the image you want to feature onto your profile pic, and then track matte it. Just pull your track matte pic whip of your image layer to your prof pic layer. But after doing so, it doesn't look quite there yet, right? Well, fear not, you can adjust the position and scale settings until it fits right in the ring. And voila! Now let's start animating. For this animation, I want the bubbles to pop out from a scale of 0 to a scale of 100. So let's make it pop by animating the scale properties of all of the elements. And because I want all of them to scale at the same point, let's create a null object and use that as our anchor point. Now we parent all our layers to the null object, and then we start animating the main scale property there. As you can see over here, I also added a little bit of a scale and a delay on the story ring. This is just so that I add a bit of secondary motion onto the bubble so that it looks a bit more lively. If you want to learn more about secondary actions and more about the 12 principles of animation, I recommend this Alan Becker video for you to watch down in the description below. Now that we have done with the bubble animation, let's go animate the your story text. For this animation, I want it to slide down, so let's have it slide down just a teeny bit. Also add some easing and also tweak the opacity from 0 to 100. Have it fade in. Now let's add a little touch on the add story icon. The reason why I animate it to have tray keyframes and have its curve this way is so that it bounces a little, just because I want to give it a much more organic feel. So now that your story bubble is done, you can duplicate it to all of the other story bubbles. So since there will be 4 story bubbles, so duplicate it another 3 times with Ctrl D. But wait, Ben, if I change one of them, won't all of them change? Well, here's the trick. Let me teach you how to work around this. Go to your project, go to your story bubble comp, and then also duplicate it another 3 times. So now there's story bubble 2, story bubble 3, and story bubble 4. What you have to do now is select your story bubble layer that you want to replace on your comp, and then while holding Alt, drag and drop the layer you want to replace, and ta-da! You have now successfully replaced your layer. And now every profile picture you change from these individual comps will be all different, and they won't affect the previous one you have made. So now replace your profile pic with a new profile pic and change the text to someone else's username. In these instances, they're just gonna be all me and... Also, offset the bubbles so it feels a bit more organic. And voila, we have finished the first top bar part of the animation. Next, let's move on to the bottom bar. I know I mentioned earlier I want the animation to flow from top to bottom, but sometimes it's best to award yourself with something easier to do so that you keep your retention onto your work much longer rather than halfway stopping and procrastinating by scrolling through Instagram. So yeah, I want to award myself with an easier animation I know I can pull off immediately. So let's work on the bottom bar first. So if you like, you can of course make them pop, but I've decided the only thing I want moving would be the notification pop-up and its indicator. So I'll animate its scale, its Y positioning, its opacity, also the opacity for the red indicator, and do an overall fade in the main comp, and voila. Alright, now we reach the juicy part of the phone comp. So let's enter our main card comp. In our main card, of course you can have every single element pop and slide in if you want, but for the most part I think I would just want them to fade in. So let's do that. And now I think I might want the main photo to slide in from the top. So let's do that. Once again, feel free to adjust the timing however you like. Alright, now the matte is sliding in the way you want it to be, but there's nothing to hide it for it to come down on top, right? I mean, you could use a mask, but here's the easy way. As I mentioned earlier, how do you fix this? You can fix it with a track matte. So you duplicate your photo main and then have it track matte itself so that it stays within the boundaries of itself. So now it slides in perfectly from top to bottom. So now once you have done that, throw in the image below the photo main that's moving, and then track matte that to that moving photo main, and then pre-comp it. This is so that your image will only be in that size when you move left or right, which is what I'm gonna do next. Also, because I'm featuring 3 images, I'm gonna duplicate this 3 times in the comp and 3 times in my project, and then replace the layers accordingly. If you plan to do 5, then sure, do 5. If you plan to do 10, sure, do 10. Just remember to duplicate them accordingly. So I decide I want it to swipe to the left, so let's keyframe it. So there are 2 ways to animate this. You can either use a null object and pair them to the null object and then slowly put them correctly with a bit of math. Or you can be a little bit lazy like me and just pair them all to the first one. And after a bit of math and moving it to the side, I parent the layers accordingly, and voila. Don't forget to also animate the indicators. And now we are done with the animation of the phone. So for the cards that will go behind the phone, I envision it to be mostly still. At most, they just move positions. So straight away, all you have to do is just track matte the image and you're good to go. Once you're finished track matting the photos you want to feature on the separate cards, you can begin animating their positions. Try to match the timing so that it looks seamless as possible. And also, do your best to copy the easing so that it looks as if it is one with the animation that's happening on the phone. Of course, one easy way for me to do this is that I use this free plugin called Easecopy, which allows me to quickly copy the easing of anything I want. Alright, the slide looks good enough now, but I want to add a bit of, coming down. I want the card to slowly fade into existence from the top as the same motion of the rest of the animation of the phone. So let's do that. Add a bit of delay so it feels flowy. And I think I want them to zoom out of existence to the top. And actually, I can make this a looping animation. So let's do that. And so that is how I animated the IG carousel for this tutorial. I would like to see your take on this animation as well, so feel free to tag me on your socials. And if you've watched until this point of the video, thank you so much for sticking to the end. And I'll see you next time. Bye bye.